Minnesota by 11. Anthony Davis is the first player in NBA history to finish with 27 points, 25 rebounds, 7 steals, 5 assists, and 3 block shots. The Clippers lost to Milwaukee. They played without Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. George has a sore left knee. Kawhi is nursing a groin injury. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Climate is king.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that caring for the community means caring about the climate. You might have heard that we announced a pretty bold 12-month, $2 million campaign to do 4 things. Increase climate literacy, turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation, connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple of national town halls broadcasting live from Los Angeles, to which you will be invited. And we'll be rolling out a robust social media campaign on all our platforms, as well as an outdoor media campaign, all designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you in our fight for climate justice.
We want cleaner air.
Caring about the community means caring about the climate. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world if we care enough. 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 If we care enough.
1, 2, 3, go! I'm gonna try to keep it coming. Things ain't always smooth, but I'll be alright as long as I can find the groove. Yes, I will. Somehow I know that I can make it. You seem to like my style. Don't you worry, I'm gonna be around a while. Yes, I will. I'm just happy to see you talk to me back in style again.
Live from historic Leimert Park in Los Angeles, California, I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm so glad to see you and me back in stride again. Before we get started with today's show, let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get updates on X, that's formerly Twitter, at Tavis Smiley. By the way, should you miss any part of today's program or want to catch up on previous shows, you can always visit thetavisSmileyShow.com. That's thetavisSmileyShow.com, or wherever you get your podcast, and listen to the Tavis Smiley podcast version of this live program at your leisure. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, a conversation with sociologist Jonathan Metzl about his new book, What We've Become, Living and Dying in a Country of Arms. Metzl dissects a racially charged mass shooting and re-examines how we as a nation should address gun violence, an issue President Biden raised in his recent State of the Union address. There are myriad social, ideological, historical, racial, and political reasons that mass shootings occur on a nearly daily basis in this country. It's a shame and disgrace. We'll talk about it with author Jonathan Metzl in hour 2. In our third hour, 2 conversations. Up first,
you know, the fact is, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the greatest labor leaders in our country's history. He wasn't president of any union, and they don't call him a labor leader in history books. But the struggle for economic and social justice on and off the job was a core part of the story of them and the vision of Dr. King. As a labor leader myself, I see King as a direct inspiration and a guiding light of the 21st century union movement.
the man who secured that historic deal with the big three automakers. UAW President Shawn Fain joins us to talk about what he's up to, what's ahead for the United Auto Workers at the top of Hour 3. Shawn Fain, look forward to that conversation. On the B side of Hour 3, in 1981, an AM radio contest offered $50,000 to a single mother teetering on eviction, a schoolboy navigating identity, a Holocaust survivor, a daredevil racer living on the edge, and others who participated in a treasure hunt through Southern California. The Mighty 690 is a new book which delves into the takeaways of this iconic bit of radio history, the desperation, the redemption, the nostalgia. We'll talk to lawyer and author Alexander Hamilton Charon on the backside of Hour 3. In this first hour today, though, Coleman Hughes on his new text, The End of Race Politics. Coleman Hughes is a writer, podcaster, opinion columnist, and CNN analyst whose new book makes the case for a, quote, colorblind approach, close quote, to politics and culture. As he sees it, the so-called anti-racist movement is driving us, ironically, toward a new kind of racism. As one of the few black students in his philosophy program at Columbia years ago, Coleman wondered why his peers seemed more pessimistic about the state of American race relations than his own grandparents, who had lived through segregation. His book, The End of Race Relations, is the culmination of his years-long search for an answer, and I am anxious to unpack and interrogate Coleman's thesis in a moment. But first, I am humbled and honored to welcome new listeners to this program. In Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, we can now be heard right now and every day, every weekday that is, on WOL 1450 AM. I am honored to be heard now on WOL 1450 AM in the nation's capital. Let me also welcome new listeners today in New York City, tuning in on WHCR 90.3 FM, and the good folk in Des Moines, Iowa, checking us out right now on KJMC 89.3. We welcome Washington, D.C., New York City, Des Moines, Iowa. Today, more coming on board in the days ahead, but want to just take a moment to welcome those stations today. And I thank you all for giving us a chance to be heard. I feel blessed and highly favored to have these new affiliates carrying this program. So thank you, thank you, thank you. When we come forward, we'll commence our conversation with Coleman Hughes about his new book, The End of Race Politics. You are listening to Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Are you ready to ignite your potential? Special Needs Network presents the CORE Workforce Development Grant, an opportunity designed just for you. You've been there for everyone else. Now it's time to be there for yourself. Whether you're a college student or a working professional, the CORE program is here to empower you on your journey. Get paid with free specialized diversity training, mentorship, and stipend to fuel your passion, power, and purpose in the behavioral health sciences. It's time to focus on your dreams while making a difference in your community. Don't wait. Visit snnla.org/core program to apply today. Be the spark that ignites connections. Your future is waiting. Again, that's snnla.org/core program.
LADWP is proud to partner with KBLA to share with you how to start the new year without bill worries. We're here to help if you're behind on your bill or need help staying current. Sign up anytime online for Level Pay to set predictable monthly payments throughout the year, including for past due amounts. You can also check out the special extended pay arrangements of up to 48 months to help pay down your bill. If you're a senior or income qualified, you may be eligible for Easy Save to receive discounts and also qualify for free and discounted energy and water saving devices. You can get up to $15,000 for past due water and or sewer bills and up to $3,000 for electric bills. But you gotta act fast. Funding is limited. You can reduce your past due bills and kick off the year right, because here at LADWP, we're here to help. Visit ladwp.com/cares today and find out more.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
All right, let's get this party started with our first guest on today's program. Coleman Hughes, once again, is a CNN analyst and author of the new book, The End of Race Politics. I'm delighted to have him on this program. Coleman, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. I'd like to just first apologize to you and your listeners. I'm getting over a cold, so my voice is not going to sound like it usually does.
Well, we accept the apology and appreciate you carrying on nonetheless, pressing forward to honor your commitment to engage in this dialogue, and I've been waiting for it and look forward to it. Let me start with this. I took a moment earlier, Coleman, as you heard, to try to give the backstory of how this text came to be, but tell me a bit more about the backstory of how one even finds oneself writing a book called The End of Race Politics, and then we'll interrogate that.
So I grew up in a suburb called Montclair, New Jersey. Some of your listeners may or may not be familiar with it. It's a liberal and racially diverse town right outside of New York, really beautiful, idyllic suburb. I grew up with friends of every single race, and I did not think of them as a particular race. I thought of them as individuals. I thought of them by their characteristics. And I lived a childhood basically as close to Dr. King's dream as one could. But when I got to Columbia University, there was a very new philosophy around race that I was unfamiliar with. And in the book, I call it neo-racism. Mm-hmm. But essentially, it was a point of view that said, instead of race being meaningless, actually race is very meaningful. Whiteness it equates to a kind of evil, and blackness or POC-ness equates to a kind of moral superiority, and we ought to all be interrogating our racial identities all the time. And I found this very alienating, and that was really the genesis of my interest in the topic of race.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot to unpack just in that first statement. Let's get started here. I wonder, first of all, whether or not you think that black folk are now or ever will be viewed in the way that you view those persons that you grew up with of different races. That is to say, that we will be seen beyond our skin color as you purportedly saw your friends. Again, you think black folk are seen that way now or ever will be in this country?
I think that we can inch towards a reality bit by bit where black people are seen as individuals. Obviously, there's always going to be a part of the country that's going to be racist, and I think that I view racism like murder. It's never going to go away, but we can make it come down. We can decrease it quite a bit. So I think that every new generation of kids is an opportunity to re-enshrine the colorblind ethic. And bit by bit, I do believe that within reason, black people can be seen as individuals by the rest of the country.
You quoted Dr. King or mentioned Dr. King earlier. I am a King student, as you may know. I've written a book about Dr. King. I've studied him for most of my career. So I think I know him fairly well. And what one will never find in all of King's work, his writings, his prose, his speeches, you will never find King talking about colorblind anything. So I always find it fascinating when people mention Dr. King and then colorblind in the same sentence. That was not the lens through which King saw America. There was no such thing to King as colorblindness.
Well, surely the fact that he didn't use the word doesn't mean that he didn't convey the meaning.
And to your mind, he would convey that meaning by what? What did he do or say that suggested to you that he was conveying a meaning of colorblindness as an ethos in this country?
He constantly emphasized the importance of common humanity.
Mm-hmm.
He said, as you know, the fundamental thing about man is not the color of his skin or the texture of his hair, but the quality of his soul. This was a very common theme. And when it came to public policy, as he wrote in his book, Why We Can't Wait, he said, yes, we have to address racial inequality. Yes, we have to address the legacy of slavery. But the way to do that is with class-based anti-poverty programs that target the black and white poor alike, but will disproportionately target the black poor because black people are disproportionately poor. But it's on the basis of class rather than race.
Yeah.
So because he didn't use the word, I don't think that it's fair to say he wasn't communicating the idea.
I think he was not creating that, was not creating or suggesting that idea. I think that what King was calling for was equality. To your brilliant point, every speech King gave basically talked about equality in some shape, form, or fashion, fairness, fundamental fairness for the Negro in America, for the colored person in America back then. That was his call for equality and for fundamental fairness. But King clearly understood that race was not just a personal reality, Coleman. It was indeed and remains a political reality in this country.
Yes, but because it was a political reality then, the way I view a colorblind society is kind of like a peaceful society. Well, we're never going to get 100% peaceful society, but we have that as a North Star to know which direction we're going, when we're going forward and when we're going backwards. So I don't expect that we're ever going to get to a perfectly colorblind society, but we have to know when we're going forward and when we're going backwards. And when we're going backwards is when we are teaching people to cling more and more to their race, to see other people as members of a race rather than as individuals, and to inject race into public policy as well.
So I think there are many critiques of color blindness. I don't want to spend all of our time in this conversation. There's a lot in your book. I want to delve more into it. Again, the book is called The End of Race Politics, written by Coleman Hughes, CNN analyst. And we're honored to have you on this program. But there are a number of critiques of color blindness. If I had the time, I could drill down into. But part of one of the most prima facie critiques is that color blindness, by definition, color blindness on demand means not seeing color. Not seeing color means not seeing me in the way, the shape, and the frame, and the form that God created. So the whole notion of color blindness means not appreciating my blackness, not seeing my brownness, not seeing my Asianness, not seeing whatever it is that God made me that makes me uniquely different. And that's the role that I want to play in this society. So the notion that we should not see color is one thing. The notion that we should treat people fundamentally fair, no matter their color, is another thing. I don't buy the argument that you should not see me for everything that God made me to be, including my blackness.
So let me agree with you in part.
Okay.
I agree that colorblindness, for me, does not equal pretending not to see race. And this is why I emphasize this early in my book. We all see race, in particular adults, and we're all capable of being racially biased. So that's not what I mean when I'm talking about colorblindness. When I talk about colorblindness, I mean try to treat people without regard to race, both in your personal life and in public policy.
I hear that. And yet I'm pivoting now to another issue you raised in the book. I'm pivoting now to this issue of reverse racism. It's as if you talk about this respectfully, like we're playing on a level playing field. And the playing field, as you certainly know, for black people has never been level in this country. And so you are one of those Americans who believe in and have bought into this notion of reverse racism. Before I critique the notion of reverse racism, tell me a bit more about why you believe it exists in the first place.
When you have a policy, as we had during COVID, when the government earmarked $28 billion to help restaurants that were on the verge of bankruptcy, and instead of giving it to the restaurants based on how much they needed, gave it to them based on race, that is to say, prioritized everyone who wasn't a white man and put white men at the back of the line, one has to be able to put themselves in the shoes of one of those white men who might not be particularly wealthy or privileged, and as a result of his skin color, was treated differently in a situation where his livelihood hung in the balance. Now, what do you want to call that? We could play a semantic game and call it, disagree about what to call that. I think that we should just call a spade and call it racism, and understand that we are going to create a very aggrieved and angry white core in this country if we don't stop those kinds of policies and instead do things on the basis of class and merit and so forth.
That's what you call it. I would call it. I would call it helping small businesses survive. Small business is the engine that drives this country. And if people of color are particularly hit hardest in COVID, and all the evidence suggests, I mean, this is incontrovertible. The data suggests very clearly that black people and people of color were hit hardest by COVID than any other community. And so if those communities are hit hardest, let me just take your example and kind of flip it. If I'm in a major car accident, you and I are in a car together, and we're rushed to the hospital, and you have a brain injury, and I have, I'm bleeding, my pinky toe on my right foot is bleeding. I would like to think they would take you into surgery first and deal with my pinky toe bleeding a little bit later. The point is, the part of the body that's received the most harm ought to receive the most attention. So that when black people and people of color are the ones who are harmed the most, Coleman, they are the ones who ought to receive those resources. So I don't see that as a competition with white folk. I see that as attending to the needs of those persons who've been most hurt, number one. Number two, and I'll let you respond. Number two, it's a nice example to pull out of to suggest or to frame with regard to the answer that you gave, but there are all kinds of stories. I'm looking at my board out right now, Miles, and Miles happens to have one right now, a Lakers jersey. So this comes to mind immediately. The Lakers were one of many, many well-to-do companies, firms, institutions that turned around and gave COVID money back because they were given so many millions of COVID dollars they didn't even need. Let's face it, for a while, there was no NBA. And the Lakers and other national, multinational companies and organizations were getting money from the federal government, many of them courageously and I think honorably turn that money back over. And so there are those stories as well. And so to pull out the story that some black businesses got money in COVID when their communities, when their businesses were hit hardest, I think is not a good example of reverse racism. That's just my thought. Your response.
So let's extend your car accident analogy.
Okay.
One person gets hit in the brain and one person gets hit in the toe, or whatever it is that you said. If they got to the hospital, which would make more sense? To look at the injury they have or to look at their race? Obviously, you would want to look at the injury, and you treat the brain damage first because it's brain damage.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
So extending this analogy to the COVID policy, when you had restaurant owners send in the amount that they were in financial pain, it could have been sorted by that amount. In other words, you help first the people that are in the most financial pain. But instead of doing it that way, they did it based upon race.
Well,
you understand? So it actually is targeting, my way is actually targeting the people who need it most, and by definition might be helping more black people than white people. But it's doing it on the basis of a real proxy for need rather than a superficial proxy for need, which is race.
Yeah, I think if you use your example to your point, which I concede, you end up in the same place, which is that the people who most need the help are African Americans. I don't know the specifics of the policy in terms of whether or not they did in fact do it by race. I've not seen data to suggest that. What I do know is that you end up in the same place, that the people who are most harmed in COVID happen to be black people specifically and other people of color. And I think, debating the process for how they got the resources they needed really isn't the primary issue. But I take your point. Just disagree with it. But while we're on this notion of reverse racism, Dr. King, again, you raised King first. I'm going to follow you once again. King defined racism, and those who worked with him defined racism, as I'm sure you well know, as prejudice plus power. Racism is prejudice plus power. If black people have no power, even if they have the capacity to be prejudiced, if they have the capacity to hate white people just for being white, they may be prejudiced, but prejudice plus power equals racism. If there is no power to put behind that prejudice, how can black folk ever engage in reverse racism? Maybe prejudice, but reverse racism?
My understanding from his last book, and I can quote from it, is he defined racism as a doctrine of congenital inferiority of a people.
Mm-hmm.
And more than once in his life, including his New York Times interview in the New York, he said, and I quote, "Black supremacy would be equally evil as white supremacy."
Agreed.
So I don't know where you're getting that the idea that prejudice plus power was the definition of racism used by the civil rights movement, that's not part of my understanding or anything I've seen or read.
Yep.
The first time I hear of that definition is with the Black Power movement and Stokely Carmichael, which is quite a different philosophy.
It is a different philosophy. In some ways it is, in some ways it isn't. And the phrase that prejudice plus power is what King's students, Dorothy Cotton and others, taught when they convened these classes to train people how to protest James Lawson here in Los Angeles. This is a familiar refrain to them. I mean, you can quote King from a speech, and it's an accurate quote, to be sure, but it does not in any way take away from the fact that in fact was their operational definition during that particular era. But I'm wondering, though, if you can give me some examples. I'm still trying to follow your argument. I mean, I'm following it, but I want to give it, a fair hearing. Can you give me examples? Is there anything that comes to mind immediately of where black people have engaged in writ large, have engaged in reverse racism?
My criticism is not of black people, but of the government mainly.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk about policies of reverse racism, I'm not talking about individual black people or black institutions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about policies such as the one I mentioned. You can also see the one that prioritized non-farmers
sure.
Who were struggling during COVID. You can also look at policies adopted by the CDC, which prioritized certain groups, recommended prioritizing certain groups for the vaccines based upon the racial composition of those groups rather than based upon who needed the vaccine most from an age and sickness point of view. This kind of philosophy is all over the place. I mean, obviously, before affirmative action was overturned, you had race-based affirmative action, which only discriminated against whites, but also Asians at universities in favor of blacks and Hispanics. And so those are some examples right there.
I guess what I'm thinking about, and let me pose this question now. I'm looking at my clock. I'll give you a chance to respond to it, Coben, when we come forward. What I'm thinking about now, as you offer that response, is this: if these so-called reverse racism programs and policies of the government were aiding and abetting black people so well, if we were being advanced so greatly by these so-called reverse racism policies of the federal government, then why is it that black folks still lag far behind in every single leading economic indicator category? We could have a great debate. We won't today. I want to focus on your book. We could have a great debate about whether across the board, writ large, government programs have helped or hurt black people more, helped or hurt. I could have that debate all day long. And for the sake of argument, I would take the hurt side. There have been certainly moments in American history where we've been benefited by Supreme Court decisions and certain government programs. But even when we do benefit from corrective programs, say like affirmative action, they move as swiftly as they can to wipe those programs out. So again, if these so-called reverse racism programs and policies are aiding or abetting black people in such a major way, then where is the evidence that suggests that black folk in any way are benefiting from these programs to the detriment of other people, white people namely, and where's the evidence that we are gaining ground, again, given that we are economically lagging behind in every single leading category? We'll talk about that and a great deal more. His book is called The End of Race Politics. The author is Coben Hughes. You're listening to him right now on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
Hey y'all, Mona Swain here from Target's new YouTube series, My Cart is Full, where we feature black founders and creators highlighting their connection to our community. As an actor and content creator, I love using my voice to inspire young black women who look like me. When it comes to feeding my shine, seeing myself reflected in black-owned and founded products at Target brings me joy. Together, we are Black Beyond Measure. Learn more at target.com/Black Beyond Measure.
Cookie wants to be a professional wrestler.
I'm Cookie Serratos and I'm 11 years old.
She also wants to win all the medals. That's why Cookie and her family make every day count, squeezing out her best with Go-Go Squeeze.
Okay, Cookie, let's break for a Go-Go Squeeze.
Go-Go Squeeze fruit-on-the-go pouches are a nutritious snack made from 100% fruit with no sugar added.
Go, Cookie!
Because when you nurture your kids, you squeeze out the best in them. Squeeze out the best with Go-Go Squeeze. Not a low-calorie food. Products range from 11 to 13 grams of sugar and 60 to 70 calories per serving.
We welcome you to a Monday, March the 11th. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The Pentagon says there's no evidence the U.S. covered up the existence of UFOs. The Department of Defense released a 63-page report on unidentified anomalous phenomena on Friday. It said investigative efforts determined that most sightings were the result of misidentification of ordinary objects and phenomena. In California, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass has signed a formal agreement with Paris officials on issues related to hosting the next two Summer Olympics. The African-American mayor, along with other LA officials, arrived in Paris Thursday for a weekend of meetings. A statement from the mayor's office said the agreement is to formalize collaborating on our shared priorities. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Robert Half research indicates 9 out of 10 hiring managers are having difficulty hiring. Robert Half is here to help. Their recruiting professionals use proprietary AI to connect businesses with highly skilled talent. At Robert Half, they know talent. Visit roberthalf.com today.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A special day Sunday for the USC women's basketball program. The Trojans won the Pac-12 tournament championship for the first time since 2014. They also found out they can win a title game when freshman sensation Juju Watkins has a bad day. The nation's second leading scorer had only 9 points Sunday against Stanford. USC still won. The Trojans beat Stanford by 13 in Vegas. Guard Mackenzie Forbes stepped up with a game-high 26. USC should get a #1 seed in the NCAA tournament. The brackets will be announced next Sunday. The Lakers beat Minnesota by 11. Anthony Davis is the first player in NBA history to finish with 27 points, 25 rebounds, 7 steals, 5 assists, and 3 block shots. The Clippers lost to Milwaukee. They played without Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. George has a sore left knee. Kawhi is nursing a groin injury. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Climate justice, climate equity, climate resilience. By any other name, we demand environmental justice in 2024 and beyond. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating. And so, as a Black woman in recovery, hope must be loud. It grows louder when you ask for help and you're vulnerable. It is the thread that lets you know that no matter what happens, you will be okay.
When we learn the power of hope, recovery is possible. Find out how at startwithhope.com. Brought to you by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, Shatterproof, and the Ad Council.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the Voice of Reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the Voice of Reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Did you know Discover wants everyone to feel special? That's why with your Discover card, you have access to 24/7 customer service, as well as $0 fraud liability, which means you're never held responsible for unauthorized purchases. Learn more at discover.com/credit card. Limitations apply.
If you're an adult in need of an accredited high school diploma, the Los Angeles Public Library can help. You can earn one for free in as few as 5 months online with 24/7 access. You also get a personal academic coach plus special training focused on 9 in-demand industries, as well as a resume and cover letter to advance your career. Visit the website at lapl.org/diploma. That's lapl.org/diploma.
Do you support public education? More than 38,000 educators at United Teachers Los Angeles do too. Together, we have fought for a better public education for our students and communities, and having you on our side has been essential in our fight for better public schools. Together, we will continue to work for public schools with green spaces, more mental health staff, smaller class sizes at every grade level, and a higher investment in the Black Student Achievement Plan. We are UTLA, and you make us stronger.
He's rooting for everybody black. Everybody black. More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
More of Coleman Hughes coming your way right now. He is a CNN analyst, a podcaster, and the author of a very provocative book that many people are talking about. It's called The End of Race Politics. And I didn't want to forego the opportunity to interrogate it myself. It's called The End of Race Politics. I'm not sure that's possible because I believe that racism is the most intractable issue in this country. We'll get Coleman's take on that in just a moment and a few other issues that I raised before the break. But let me just read, as you might imagine, Coleman, this conversation is generating a lot of response. Let me just read one comment from a listener and get your take on it. Many of the reasons, Coleman, it appeared that black communities were prioritized during COVID was more specifically that demos with a higher percentage of comorbidities and pre-existing conditions were in fact prioritized. Those people, because of poor access to health care, poor pay, food deserts, etc., those people happen to be black and brown. Your thoughts?
Not true in New York, where Governor Kathy Hochul released guidelines which said that being black qualified as a comorbidity, independent of the real comorbidities like obesity and asthma, say. Though I don't know what may be true in other states, and I don't know what state your listener is from. Tavis, if you don't mind,
sure.
Can I address myself to the point you made just before the commercial break?
I was going there. Go ahead.
You made a very strong point, and I'm going to surprise you by agreeing with it.
Okay.
Your point was that if these reverse racist policies are helping black people so much, why do black people remain poorer, more incarcerated, on and on and on? Well, the truth is these policies do not help the black masses. They help the black elite, and I talk about this in my book. I'll give two examples. What percent of black 18-year-olds every year do you think get into college because of affirmative action? Now, this is before it was outlawed.
Sure.
1%. 1%. Because 99% either don't graduate high school but don't go to college, or go to big state schools that don't require racial preferences. This is a policy billed as helping black people in general, which really only helps black people like me, black elites. When after George Floyd, the response from many companies was to appoint more black people to the boards of publicly traded companies. Now, if you're on the board of a publicly traded company, you're probably a millionaire. That's got almost nothing to do with helping the problems of the black 99% who aren't millionaires. So on down the list, you find that these policies, which are reverse racist policies, almost always are targeted towards the black elite, which is one of the reasons why I think policy should be done on the basis of class rather than race, because then you would actually be targeting the poor of all colors.
I'm not opposed at all to government policies being targeted by class. No argument for me in that regard. So you give me one, I give you one. You agree with my thesis, I agree with yours. That your class is not a bad way to process how we engage these programs, and yet I'm always troubled by it. I'm actually tickled by it more than I'm troubled by it. I'm always tickled by why people offer a critique that a program is a bad program because it happens to help the black elite. One, as if they aren't black. Number two, if they're qualified to get there, most of them oftentimes still need some help to get through. But this notion that just because you're black and you're better off than other black people, that you will not encounter racism in your life is ridiculous. I guess one could call me black elite. But if we had the time to run through the story of all the hurdles I've had to overcome as one of the black elite, a better story, John H. Johnson, who founded Ebony and Jet magazine, I would never go to Chicago without going to spend time with him. And as well as he did, multi-millionaire to be sure, I was honored, along with Jesse Jackson and Bill Clinton, to give the eulogy, the three of us did, at his funeral. And yet, if you talk to John Johnson, if he were here right now, he'd be Exhibit A. He would tell you that no matter how well he did with Ebony and Jet, he could still never command the same ad dollars that Life magazine got, that People magazine got, Ebony and Jet subscriptions all over the country. But he could never command the same ad dollar because of race and racism. As I said, the most intractable issue in this country. So this argument that a particular program may help black elite, that argument never works with me, because they're still black and they're still encountering racism, just at a different level.
Well, the one thing I would say in response to that is you still have to consider the fact that these policies that racially, if there's one lesson from Black history, it's that if a people suffers policies that discriminate against it, they're going to be mad about it for a long time. Why haven't we learned that lesson? I believe that we have to learn that lesson, and the way we have to do that is by getting rid of policies that look at the race of elites and dish out privileges on that basis, because you are going to create grievances among the white community, among the Asian communities that suffer these policies. That's not going to help us in the long run as a country. So my problem, one second, my problem is not that these policies help black elites. My problem is that they create a zero-sum game that pits black elites against white elites against Asian elites. How can that be a recipe for interracial harmony? It can't.
Powerful but not persuasive, creative but not convincing. And here's what I mean by that. With affirmative action, the program you and I were just discussing, as you well know, white women benefited more from that program than anybody. And so to suggest that black people are harmed by corrective programs that are, in theory, designed to help them, but in reality never get to them, I think, respectfully, Coleman, that's where your critique ought to be, that when these programs are written and designed to aid and abet black people, either because of race or because of class, 9 times out of 10, the stuff never gets to them. And somebody else ends up benefiting from these programs, e.g. white women and affirmative action.
So my understanding is that that may have been true in the 70s, but if you actually look at colleges in the past 10 or 20 years, colleges now have a shortage of men. More women now graduate high school than men. More women apply to college than men. So these elite colleges, they're actually, if anything, they're giving men broadly a leg up because they don't have enough boys.
But the feeder to those colleges obviously are public schools all across this country. So let's pivot to that for a second, since we're talking about education. When you talk about reverse racism, help me understand how that becomes your critique when you and I both know, here again, the data is incontrovertible, that the folk ending up too often on the short end of the education stick are black and brown kids in public schools. Everybody wants to talk about school choice rather than making all schools choice. Most students in this country are now and forever will be in a public education system. And we don't give the resources, we don't give the attention, we don't drill down the way we should on how we give black and brown kids access to a better education. Even George Bush called it the soft bigotry of low expectations. That's the feeder to these schools. So your critique, you end up writing a nice book called The End of Race Politics, and your example is about what happens, at the college level or the post-secondary level. But the critique ought to be of the way we do public education every day, where black and brown kids are being left farther and farther behind. And I'm just trying to figure out why your lens is over here and not over here.
The lens is in both places, and if listeners pick up my book, they can see in the last chapter, I talk about K through 12 education, and I look at a study by the black Harvard economist Roland Fryer, who went to public schools in Houston and did an experiment where he was able to take over something like 10 or more public schools and essentially do whatever he wanted with them, as if no rules. He fired all the principals, he fired half the teachers, replaced them with better people. He extended the school hours, he extended the school day, and I believe he extended the school year. He did more frequent testing, and he set a culture of what he called a culture of high expectations, the opposite of what Bush was correctly complaining about. And he was able to raise math and English scores at those schools substantially. So that is what I feel we really ought to do. That's really what's important, because, as you say, the pipeline, we have to address the pipeline issue, not try to rig results by starting at 18.
I am not one of those persons who believes that a rising tide necessarily lifts all boats. If the tide, for example, comes up too fast, comes up too quick, and you're in a dinghy, you're gonna get taken under. So a rising tide, and that assumes that you have a boat. So I don't believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. Number one, what I do believe is that when you make Black America better, you make all of America better. And if there are corrective programs geared toward Black people, even because they are Black, what's wrong with that? If making Black folk better makes America better, what is the problem? That's what I want to ask Coleman Hughes when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Hey, I have a secret. I use Secret Whole Body Deodorant because more than just my armpits stink.
Oh, can I use it where my bra rubs under my...
Oh, yeah.
And what about down there? You know, my...
Totally. 4 out of 5 gynecologists would recommend it. So I tried it, and now I get 72 hours of freshness from my pits to my...
Ooh, I love that it's a spray.
Me too. And it comes in sticks and creams too. Go get your Secret Whole Body Deodorant.
Hey, what are you doing up on the step stool?
About to clean these light fixtures. The whole family's coming over, and if there's even a speck of dust in the house, my abuela will find it.
Here, I got a Swiffer duster to help with that.
A Swiffer what?
A Swiffer duster. It has this cool extendable handle that reaches 6 feet to get high and low, with fluffy dusters that easily trap and lock dust.
So, no more step stool?
No more step stool.
Easily trap and lock dust from hard-to-reach places with the Swiffer duster. Love it or your money back.
Hey, Californians, are you ready to make your home ownership dreams come true? The California Dream for All Shared Appreciation Loan Program might be for you. First-generation homebuyers can get down payment and closing cost assistance along with a first mortgage to help you unlock the door of your new home. Applications open in April, so talk to an approved lender to see if you're eligible. Find out more at calhfa.ca.gov/dream or call 877-922-5432. A message from the California Housing Finance Agency.
So you just used bug spray in your home. Now what? Well, between the waiting and waiting for things to dry up and keeping your family away from the mess, it hits you. You could have used Zevo. Unlike other bug sprays that stick around, Zevo goes from kill to clean in seconds. Plus, it's safe for use around people and pets when used as directed. Zevo, people-friendly, bug-deadly.
More honesty than you can handle. More empowerment than you can imagine. You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
Coleman Hughes, for the sake of argument, even if these programs and policies on the part of the government that you critique ought not be designed to benefit Black folk because of their race, what's wrong with that? If these programs benefit Black people, and when Black folk do better, the rest of the nation does better, what's wrong with that approach?
Two things are wrong with that approach. Okay. One is that race is not the best proxy for disadvantage. Class is a much better proxy for disadvantage. So if we're trying to help the truly disadvantaged, we ought to be selecting on the basis of class on measures like income and wealth rather than on the simple measure of race. And then the second thing that's wrong with that, in my view, is that race-based policies lead to a lot more backlash than class-based policies, you don't see so many people mad about, say, financial aid for poor students going to college or the earned income tax credit, because these are class-based policies that operate based on income. But you do see a lot of people that get angry about race-based policies because, by definition, they discriminate against certain individuals on the basis of their race, and that understandably and inevitably leads to anger.
Your response leads me to ask, because I think I can guess the response, but I don't want to guess. Since I've got you, I might as well just ask you directly. Given what you've just said now about race and class, what does that leave one with your view on the issue of reparations?
Yeah, so I've always supported reparations paid to people like my grandfather, for instance, who grew up under Jim Crow. They're doing a policy outside of Chicago where if you can show that you were discriminated against in the housing market in the 50s or 60s, you get reparations. I've always been in favor of that. I don't think we should give reparations for slavery to the 5th or 6th generation descendant of slaves. So I would make that distinction.
Let's interrogate that part when we come forward in our remaining moments with Coleman Hughes, author of the new book, The End of Race Politics, on Tavis Smiley.
What's your quarrel with the world? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Paid for by government.com. Did you know? The United States Mint has issued a new Morgan silver dollar coin in proof condition for the first time. Not only that, they are also minted in 99.9% pure silver for the first time ever in history. Coin experts are calling this an amazing opportunity for anyone that knows the enduring popularity of Morgans. But you must hurry. Only 400,000 of these legal tender silver dollars were issued. These first ever Morgan silver dollars are brand new with stunning mirror-like finish, minted by the iconic San Francisco Mint. Call now and you're guaranteed a new first ever 99.9% pure silver proof Morgan dollar. To learn more, call 1-800-973-9717. If you order now, you will receive a free coin collector bonus pack, a $25 value, free with every order. Call 1-800-973-9717 now to secure your new Morgan silver dollars before they are gone. That's 1-800-973-9717.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA reminds you that when we fight, we win, and we don't black down. LA Community Action Network, or LA CAN, was formed in 1999 when 25 residents of downtown LA came together and acknowledged the problems that existed in their community and made a commitment to do something about those problems, to stand together, organize, and become a force in the community that demands change. Civil rights and preventing the criminalization of poverty are their core projects. In addition, they take on women's rights, the human right to housing, and healthy food access. LA CAN also has projects focused on economic development, civic participation, voter engagement, and community media. While downtown LA remains their home base, with a particular emphasis on the Skid Row community, in 2007, they expanded their housing and healthy food access work into South Central Los Angeles. LA CAN believes that power for low-income people and people of color is achieved through a large, active, and well-informed member base that utilizes a multitude of methods to advance their messages and goals. If you'd like to join the Los Angeles Community Action Network and organize people to fight back against oppression, please visit cangress.org. That's cangress.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Febreze. So my home is also my office, and before I can focus, every room's gotta be clean. That means tidying up, then spraying my Febreze Air Mist. Ooh, that's fresh. Febreze Air Mist scents are all high quality. They fight any weird funk, and they give my air an instant boost of freshness. So not only does my home smell good, I feel good too. After I Febreze, it's time to start my day.
Breathe happy, Febreze, la 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 la.
Helping to make you the most knowledgeable person in your circle of friends. This is Tavis Smiley.
Coleman Hughes' book, The End of Race Politics, is a contemplative and audacious book I just don't believe that in our lifetimes or in the foreseeable future we're going to ever see the end of racism, in large part because black folk ain't the ones who play that card most often. We're not the ones who play the race card. That card is oftentimes dealt against us. And I think your last response, Coben, respectfully, may give me all the understanding I need as to how you see the world through the prism that you look through. Because if you can't accept that there is generational trauma, politically, economically, socially, and culturally, because of what happened to our ancestors, and that is why we are in many respects in the situation that we are in, still lagging behind economically in every single category, then I see how you could end up with a thesis like yours, because that argument just doesn't hold for me, that those who've been harmed for generations by what happened ought in some way not be advantaged.
I don't accept the idea that I'm traumatized as a result of what happened to my ancestors. I find that to be profoundly disempowering and a recipe for. I don't like to project the idea that we are a broken people to the world.
Sure.
This is not. I don't think that this is a healthy mindset to persist in indefinitely.
Nobody. Let me be very, very, very clear, brother. Nobody is suggesting that black folk are a broken people. I think we're the baddest folk on the planet. As my friend Cornel West says, when we walk into the room, the good white folk ought to just give us a standing ovation. It's a miracle that we've not had a form of black Al-Qaeda every generation in this country. Black folk have learned to love this country in spite of, not because of. So ain't nobody suggesting at all that black folk are broken. Quite the contrary. Again, we have Du Bois, a great black intellectual, once asked, would America have been America without her Negro people? You don't have America. You take us out of the democratic experiment, it just falls flat. So ain't nobody saying that black folk are broken people. What I am saying is I do believe in justice. I believe in atonement. I believe in fundamental fairness. I do not believe in reverse racism. And I believe that if, in fact, black folk are the ones who've been the most harmed, at some point, you have to deal with that issue, Coleman. That's all I'm saying.
I hear that. I think my way of doing it is through class-based anti-poverty programs, because I think if you center race too much, race is a zero-sum game, and you foster racial division in the long run.
Yeah, I think I hear your point. I think there are certain programs that can in fact be class-based, and you end up covering the same terrain. I just don't accept the argument that a people who've been put upon in the way that black people have ought not to have. I mean, it's simple for me. One of a great Supreme Court justice once said, and I'm paraphrasing here: if a people have been harmed because of their race, then you cannot all of a sudden ignore their race in trying to consider the ways in which you are going to address the harm that was done to them. So we disagree on that, but again, I found the book fascinating enough to have you on. I really appreciate you powering through suffering with a cold to honor this appearance, and I take your points. We just disagree on it. The book is called The End of Race Politics. Read it for yourself. See where you come down in this conversation. Again, it's called The End of Race Politics, written by CNN analyst Coleman Hughes. I've been honored to have him on this program. Coleman, feel better. Thanks for the conversation. All the best to you, sir.
Thank you, Tavis.
Good to have you on. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
We welcome you to a Monday, March the 11th. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the efforts determined that most sightings were the result of